Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. We got friend of the show, Sam Cedar, on to talk about New Hampshire and whatever's going on in Nevada right now. Some nefarious doings are afoot. We also have Bonnie Brown from Chegg to talk about their latest college student tracking poll. And we've got Wendell Potter to talk about Medicare for All in the context of unions. That's obviously a hot debate right now.
Very big.
But first, some breaking news out of Iowa, which never stops.
Heads have not rolled, but one head has, and that is Troy Price, of the chairman of the Iowa Democratic Party. He has resigned from leadership, but that's not the more interesting part. Krystal actually found this, which is that buried within the report, the New York Times story about by Trip Gabriel about Troy Price's resignation, is that some of the decisions made it really hard to defend against accusations of cronyism or conspiracy, frankly. This is according to committee members of the Iowa Democratic Party.
Yeah, so that was the Polk County executive director, not like a Bernie fanatic or whatever.
Right.
There were a bunch of quotes in this piece of people who were like, we saw the pictures of you with the Pete people and the app makers, and it looks cozy and corrupt, et cetera. I mean, they also say, basically, look, this is the way politics have been done for so long, but that doesn't make it okay. This needs to end here.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, we all watched what unfolded. Every single decision that was made seemed to be made to go against Bernie and for Pete. The decision to release partial results, right, at 62%. The decision to count the precincts that were best for Bernie last. The decision then to side with the idea that you can't fix the math on the spread on the caucus cards.
Of course, the Pete call to the DNC in order to interfere into the process. That was really, I mean, I think that's what people need to understand, which is I don't think people can comprehend how much of the Democratic machine loves Pete Buttigieg. Like that hollowness, that like astroturfed neoliberalism. Like every think tank in town, there's a Pete sticker. You know, on somebody's laptop.
Yes.
All of these like young, these young operative class, these are all dyed-in-the-wool Pete Buttigieg supporters. And the way all of this stuff works is that they don't, it's not that Tom Perez was implicitly like, or explicitly like, yes, I will do this on behalf of Pete Buttigieg. It's the fact that he takes a lot seriously what Pete Buttigieg has to say, right? Or that Buttigieg can even get a phone call through in the first place and not complicate, complaints from somebody like a Tulsi Gabbard or an Andrew Yang about the democratic process. It's all of these things that compound in order to benefit somebody like Buttigieg, is that there's bias built into the system.
Right. Remember, this all sort of started when they got that Des Moines Register poll spiked.
Right.
Same deal, where you work the reps, call the managers, and Andrew Yang was left off of any number of surveys. No one ever cared.
And they complained.
And they complained. Yeah. It's not like they kept quiet about it. They complained, but no one ever cared. And then one survey goes out, allegedly not mentioning Pete's name, and suddenly we got to pull the whole poll, which showed Warren surging, not Pete. That can create a whole different narrative. And those two candidates, as we know, are very much media creations. So they are very susceptible to who the media is saying is up or down. So rather than Warren having a story about her, you have Pete basically at the center of the conversation about how unfair this was and was this poll unfair, et cetera, et cetera. And then lo and behold, he's able to surge into Iowa and claim at least a fake win.
It's so hard to describe how important that is. So to give you an example with Amy Klobuchar, 75% of her voters in New Hampshire made up their vote. They made up their minds about their vote right after the debate.
75%?
75%,
wow,
according to the exit polls. Think about that. So in the last days of Iowa, Buttigieg gets this poll killed, which the media would have ran wild about Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren would have gotten number 2. I am almost certain she would have gotten second in Iowa. And then we're in a totally different world. I mean, what does that look like? Where Elizabeth Warren's number 2 and then in New Hampshire. I mean, he effectively screwed her campaign based on media coverage alone. And it's all because he is able to work the refs, work the system, because they're all implicitly on his side.
Right.
And that is the danger. That's how bias works. That's how
privilege works.
That's how privilege works. I mean, this is the thing about what we try and do here, because the people will say, you're a conspiracy theorist. So I'm like, the systems are designed to work a certain way, only at the inputs of the people within the system.
Yeah.
That's why it matters.
Poor people and people of color will recognize this dynamic very clearly. Because it's just like if I call in as like an affluent white person into my kid's school, guess what? They're going to listen to me. The changes they're going to have a meeting. The changes are going to be made, etc. Try doing that as like a poor black single mom and see what happens. And that's basically the dynamic here with Pete.
There you go.
He can call into the manager. They're going to sit down. They're going to get it addressed, etc. And that's why you see every single decision go in his direction. I think there's an electability point to be made here, though, too. You are very fragile if you are dependent on the media to prop you up. And so the only campaigns that are basically not dependent on the media were Andrew Yang's. He had to build his own thing because the media never paid him any mind. Tulsi Gabbard, same thing. But really, in terms of top-tier candidates, is Bernie Sanders, who knew the media was never going to give it any love, so he had to build his own ecosystem, and Trump has done the same thing.
It's funny. Bernie and Trump are two sides of the same coin whenever it comes to this. The media will never give you a fair shake, so you just create your own ecosystems. You get direct lines to your own supporters, both through social media, and you create, because what is the most bipartisan thing in America? Hating the mainstream media. I don't think another candidate will ever be president without explicitly having hardball tactics with the media. There's a column out today in Politico of people bemoaning this, saying Bernie Sanders joins Trump and telling the media to go to hell. And they're like, oh, this is so terrible for democracy, and not being like, well, how did it get to this point?
Right.
Like, what are all these things that made it so that we're at a point where the two leading contenders, well, one, the President of the United States, one, Bernie Sanders, both have only disdain for the media. There's a reason for that.
Right. Well, and then on the other side of the fence is Bloomberg, who just owns the media. He just owns his own media. So that's the other way to go about doing it.
Yeah, that's
and,
the other.
You know, and all the journalists involved, even at other outlets, will be afraid to criticize him because they want to have the opportunity to get that paycheck down the road. By the way, all the political operatives, even the ones working for Warren and Pete and all these people, they know that if their campaign falls out, they got
paycheck waiting for you.
Potential paycheck waiting for you.
New York City apartments, salaries until December, $10,000 a month in some cases.
And how much do you think any of these networks are going to want to criticize Bloomberg when he is filling up their ad space? I mean, buying up all those ads.
Bloomberg single-handedly has pushed CPMs on YouTube, like the ad rates on YouTube, higher. Okay, in a month where they're at historic lows, solely because of the amount of money that he's spending. Now he's even paying influencers, like I can't say the name of one of the highest paid influencers on Instagram, but he's paying these like stupid. Yeah, it was all out there. Came out yesterday in the New York Times. This is a very sophisticated campaign to buy attention everywhere.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking more about Bloomberg later in the show with the panel, but up next we're going to tell you what's on our radars. That's coming up.